One day, I was driving to a friend's house in the country. It was an ordinary working Friday, and by evening, anticipating the taste of kebab and beer, I was already rushing by car along the highway from the city towards the country house. It was not far, only 18 miles from the city, and I knew the road by heart that I could get there with my eyes closed. It was easy, straight most of the time, and only at the end of the way I had to turn off toward Dixville Notch. There it was, a shortcut. On this day, it was raining with a thunderstorm. Visibility on the road was bad, so I drove slower than usual. I didn't want to get into an accident today. Halfway there, I hit a traffic jam. Where could it have come from on the highway? After 2 hours of driving, I saw the cause of the traffic jam. Road repairs. It's always like that. When I drive, it's always an adventure. Road repairs, accidents. Well, we'll have to take a detour. And how fortunate. Just before the barrier that the workers put up, there is an exit to a country road and a sign indicating that there is a detour through the village that way. The sign was so old that you couldn't even make out the name of the village. Well, maybe it's not so bad. I'll stay a little longer, bypass the repair work, and fly to my friends. As I pulled onto the road, I noticed that only I decided to detour. All the other cars immediately turned around and drove toward town. That's weird. Maybe they know a shorter route. In any case, I was already on a dirt road, and I didn't feel like turning around. There were no streetlights, of course, and the road was old, and I could see that there were very few cars on it. But it was hard to see because the rain had washed out the road so badly. I wish I hadn't gotten stuck in this quagmire of earth and clay. It was hard to drive, especially on my not new car. And then the roofs of houses appeared in the distance. It was past midnight, and the rain was getting heavier, turning into small hail. This is great. This was just what I needed. It was almost impossible to continue in this weather, so I decided to call my friends and tell them that I would only arrive in the morning and try to spend the night in this village, hoping that someone would take me in. I picked up the phone, of course, no signal. This is the 21st century, and if you turn off the main road a couple of miles outside of town, you're in the Middle Ages. Well, I hope that in a drunken frenzy, my comrades will not look for me in the middle of the night and just fall asleep, and in the morning I'll come to them. I drove up to the first houses. Apparently, this village consisted of one road with houses on the left and right. Speaking of the houses, they didn't look very livable. I didn't see what happened to the rest of the houses, but the first two shocked me a bit. To say they were old was not enough. They were dilapidated, overgrown with impenetrable thickets of some kind of shrubbery. There was no light in any of the windows. I was not surprised. It was late and people were asleep, though were there people here? Suddenly lightning flashed and I saw a silhouette on the road. He was tall, I would even say lanky. His arms seemed longer than a normal man's, and he was dressed in rags. In the moment of enlightenment on the street, after a lightning strike, he ran towards the house nearest to me. All of this happened literally in a matter of moments. I thought that maybe the poor visibility and fatigue made me think it was some kind of monster. Sure enough, it was a man fleeing the hailstorm and running towards his house. I explained to myself. Great. So there are people in this forgotten place, and I can make arrangements with them for a night's lodging. I didn't feel like getting out of the car. It was raining so hard that even if you stayed outside for 30 seconds, you'd get soaked to the skin. But there was nowhere to go. Sleeping in the car was not an option at all. I drove as close as possible to the house where the man had run away to. I took my bag, money, in case the owners asked me to pay for the night, and, gathering my strength, jumped out of the car. I ran to the front door of the house under the porch. I was soaking wet. Immediately, I felt cold and dank. Yes, the weather in early October is something. The porch I was under was leaking, but it was better than standing in the pouring rain anyway. I knocked on the door. Masters, anybody home? Silence. I knocked again. Nothing happens. I tried to open it, but it won't open. What do I do? Running to the other house means getting wet and most likely sick. No, I don't want to do that. Maybe we should go around the house and there'll be another door. We should scout it out. With that plan in mind, I walked along the wall of the house around the corner, casting a fleeting glance out the window. For a second, I thought I saw some movement there. Through a thicket of impenetrable shrubbery, I made my way to the back of the house. There was indeed a door here, and it faced the vegetable garden. Although I'm not sure those standing crosses were a vegetable garden. So, wait, crosses? Why are there crosses here? The backyard of this house looked more like an old cemetery than a vegetable garden. Something was wrong. I didn't have time to think about what I was seeing because the door behind me opened with a wild creak. Without thinking, I ducked inside. The door closed. There must have been a draft. The house smelled musty, damp, and musty of some kind. Well, at least now the rain wouldn't bother me. I picked up my phone and turned on the flashlight, noticing that my phone had 15% charge left in it. I started waving the flashlight around the room. A table, a chair, a mug, plates. Yep, I'm in the kitchen. I remembered that I had barged into the house uninvited and should at least alert my hosts to my presence. Hosts, will you accept a guest for the night? If anything, I can offer you money for your help. There was silence in reply, and only the sound of drops on the roof broke it. Well, if there is no one here, then maybe I can spend the night here unnoticed. And if the owners come, I will explain everything to them in a kind way. Okay, here's the plan. We have to find a bed at least. We can't sleep on the floor. I couldn't find a bed in the kitchen, so I had to go inside. The floor creaked loudly under my footsteps. The atmosphere was not pleasant. Night, an old house with its own cemetery in the backyard, a creaky floor. It brought to mind all the horror movies combined. A chill ran down my spine. I walked through the kitchen into a small room. There was a huge clock on the wall. You know, the kind that struck every hour as many times as there was time in the hour. It all looked very old and the clock was a little smoldered. Also in this room I saw a table with some rags on it, stained with earth or something. The room was in a terrible condition. The wallpaper had fallen off the walls, the ceiling was covered in sweat, the room in general had a ghastly appearance, and the floor was covered in dry dirt. Next to the table stood a sprung bed. Its headboard was badly rusted through, suggesting that no one had ever lived in this house at all. No one would sleep on a bed that old. No one but me. The dream came unexpectedly. Of course it did, because I hadn't slept for a whole work week, and I'd been on the road for over 5 hours. Yes, those 18 miles to the cottage turned out to be much longer. Without further ado, realizing that the house was probably abandoned and the owners would not come, I sat on the bed, not afraid that it was about to collapse, and I fell to the floor, breaking the rotten boards and falling into the cellar. I wondered if there was a cellar. Well, the bed didn't collapse, that's a good sign. I put the sack under my head instead of a pillow, closed my eyes and fell asleep. Somehow, the fear was completely gone. I woke up to a strange sound. It was as if someone was walking through the kitchen, and the floor creaked unpleasantly under his footsteps. Opening my eyes and trying to figure out what I was doing here, I sat up on the bed and called out, "Is anyone here?" The footsteps stopped. There was obviously someone in there. I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. There was no one there. I turned on the flashlight on my phone. The floor was covered in fresh dirt. What the hell is this? What's going on here at night that's so dirty? And where did it go? The thoughts in my head began to jumble with fear. As I turned to leave the kitchen, I saw a tall shadow flicker across the room. I ran over there. There was dirt again. It led to some kind of small hatch in the floor. Why hadn't I noticed it when I entered this room? Should I go in there or not? I've never fought evil before. I sat down on the bed and began to think about what to do next. I almost didn't feel like sleeping. I didn't feel like running to my car. I was just dry and the rain outside wouldn't stop, so I had to go find some adventure on my ass. In in my bag, I found my old Swiss knife. At least I had some kind of weapon. But if it's something otherworldly, it won't help me. I plucked up the courage to go to the hatch. Should I open it? No. Why? What if there's something interesting in there? Yeah, like a ghoul or something. That's interesting. Well, we've got to do something, haven't we? We have to. After I finished arguing with myself, I started to open the hatch. The hatch handle was covered in dirt, and it smelled so bad I almost saw my lunch today. It smelled like dead meat. This is getting out of hand. Well, if I'm going to get dirty in it, I have to see it through to the end. The hatch is open. I shine my phone down there. Wooden steps going down into the darkness and nothing else to see. Nice. Going down into the unknown, I noticed my phone had 5% battery life left. Okay, I quickly go down, look around, send the bad guys to the other side, and go to bed. Sounds like a plan. Just as I leaned over to start descending, suddenly something pushed me from behind and I flew down. Silence. Pain in my head. I'm lying on something hard and uncomfortable. Feeling with my fingers, I realized it was something porous and hard. It's bone! It's bone! Instantly jumping up and shining a flashlight around me, I found that the entire basement floor was strewn with bones and human skulls. I was simply numb with fear. Where did I fall? Who pushed me? How to get out of here? While my thoughts were sluggishly digesting the effects of shock in my head, something stirred in the corner. Judging by the slurping sounds, something was sitting there eating. Suddenly, the sound stopped, and it began to slowly rise, and it was probably about 2.5 meters tall. Dry, long legs, arms below the knees, hands with sickle-shaped fingers or claws, I can't make out, a head, and the head was very toothy. It looked like an elongated, gnawed skull. There were no eyes, or I couldn't see them. The ghoul lunged at me with a heartbreaking scream. I dropped my phone, dodged it, and fell. Get up! I have to get up! I mumbled to myself. Instantly, the monster turned around and lunged at me again. This time I didn't have time to parry, and a sharp claw slashed me across the chest. Pain shot through my body, and apparently not just mine. The beast roared and fell beside me. A Swiss knife was sticking out of its chest. Run! I need to get out of here. I don't have a second knife. I jumped up and started climbing the stairs, picking up my phone from the floor. And then I heard that this ghoul had gotten to his feet and was already running towards me. Gathering all my remaining strength, I climbed up the very steep stairs, not thinking about the fact that under my feet and hands, I had the ground with rotten deadness. Suddenly, I was pulled down by my leg. Good thing my shoes had zippers instead of laces. Quickly unzipping it in one movement, my boot stayed with the creep and he fell down. I opened the hatch. It was already light outside. With a quick movement picking up my bag, I crashed with all my might into the front door, the one that was locked, hoping I would kick it in. Either I weighed too little or I didn't have the strength to accelerate, but the door hit me with a thud and I flew backwards. The deadbolt. There's a deadbolt on the door. I got up quickly, ran to the door, unlocked it, and then I heard a nasty breath behind me. Without looking back, I opened the door, ran out of the house, and ran to the car. The rain was over, and fog was drifting over the ground. Getting into the car, I instantly pulled the handbrake and drove off. I looked in the rearview mirror, and there, all I could see was an old cemetery and not a single house, and 5 of these scary creatures standing in the street looking at me. I got to the cottage after all. My friends, when they saw me in the morning, were almost speechless. I was dirty, with bloody cuts all over my chest, no shoes, all disheveled. I told them everything. My friend looked at me with bewilderment and said, "There is no village there. There's only an ancient cemetery there, and it appeared after..." But wait, there was a village there, but it burned down over 100 years ago. Everyone who lived there died, and they buried all the inhabitants there on the site of the burnt village. Yeah, I guess we'll take a different road home.